undetected or untreated, cervical cancer may develop. Remember that even with 21st century medical knowledge and technique, cervical cancer is still the second most common form of cancer among women worldwide. Up to 500,000 women die every year.
Well, that's the big problem with cervical cancers, because most women don't have any symptoms until the disease is well advanced, so that you can have the infection and it can persist and go on to cause the cancer, and all of that time you're not aware you've got it.
Most women with cervical cancer will develop some sort of abnormal bleeding or discharge. It's usually what we call post-coital bleeding, which is bleeding after intercourse. Having said that, most women who have bleeding after intercourse don't have cervical cancer. They have other issues which are not that serious. A number of infections can cause bleeding after intercourse, but bleeding after intercourse, abnormal discharge, pain, bleeding between periods are all warning signs that you really need to be checked out.
Well, the cancer starts in the neck of the womb and it may cause no symptoms at all there, but gradually it grows and spreads and blocks off important parts of the body, like the ureters, the bit that takes your urine from your kidneys into the outside world, or the bowel. And it's when it starts causing that sort of problem that women become aware they've got the cancer. Unfortunately, by that time, it's almost always incurable.
And all this, remember, comes from a virus which none of us knows we carry. A virus which can cause cancer in both men and women.
So the challenge for Ian Fraser and his team was to find a vaccine that stopped the virus in its tracks. And having found what we now know under the trade name of Gardasil, someone had to prove that it worked and that it was safe.
We passed it on to other colleagues and to the big pharma companies that actually have made the vaccine, and they have done all the clinical trials. That's taken nearly 15 years and 25,000 women worldwide taking part in those studies to show that the vaccine was, as we expected, safe and immunogenic in the women that were immunised, but also that it protected against the infection. And these studies obviously had to be done in a large number of women, first of all to show that the vaccine was safe, but secondly to show that it not only prevented the infection, but prevented the risk of cancer as well.
Under pressure from women's groups and medical authorities, the federal government quickly realised there were long-term benefits in making Gardasil freely available to teenagers and young women at a cost of $100 million a year.
We are in the business of funding cost-effective health interventions, and plainly, on the advice of the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee, it was going to save a lot of lives to have this vaccination, so we're doing it. It's not going to prevent entirely a cervical cancer. It's not going to stop the need for women to get pap smears on a regular basis, but certainly it should very dramatically reduce the number of women who do in fact come down with cervical cancer.
But whenever there's a new drug on the market, there'll be lingering doubts.
So we put those questions to the experts.
How safe is Gardasil?
There's no virus DNA at all. It's what we call an empty egg or virus-like particle, and is completely safe, and there is no risk of transmission of HPV.
Will Gardasil work if I'm sexually active already?
Yes, because the vaccine's really designed to prevent infections that she may not yet have got.
What happens if Gardasil is given at the same time as other immunisations?
Well, at the moment it's recommended that it should be given on its own, simply because we're still at the stage of learning about side effects, but there's no particular reason why it would be bad to give the vaccine along with other vaccines.
Will Gardasil prevent cervical cancer if a woman carries HPV already?
It would depend on what type of HPV she is carrying. If she is carrying type 6, 11, which are non-cancer types, but 16 and 18, then the vaccine will not protect her at this point in time, and she is waiting for her own immunity to kick in to allow her to remove that virus from her body.
Will Gardasil be effective as soon as the first dose is given?
A bit of protection immediately after the first dose, but the best protection comes after the second and third doses.
Should a woman have the vaccine if she's pregnant?
We would recommend against that, but in the studies that have been done, a number of women were pregnant and there was no adverse or deleterious effect.
The government immunisation program is available to females aged 12 to 26, but should older women be immunised?
That's a matter for each individual woman to decide. If they think they're still at risk of acquiring one of these sexually transmitted infections, then yes, clearly they should be vaccinated. The obvious example would be a woman who hadn't been sexually active until she was 26 and was taking up a new relationship. There would be a significant risk of her acquiring an infection then.
How long will Gardasil immunity last?
Well, we hope it'll last for the lifetime of the woman. It'll certainly last long enough to protect the vast majority of women against getting infection during the time when they're at greatest risk, which is when they're under 30.
Males carry the human papillomavirus, so why don't we just immunise all boys?
Well, that would be one strategy. I mean, that's been talked about quite seriously, but it seems more important to protect the woman. You know, the woman takes control of her own protection against the disease she doesn't want to get by being vaccinated.
Should women continue to have pap smears even after they've been immunised?
Yes, women should continue to have pap smears even though they might have been vaccinated. They may be carrying the virus or other virus types, so it's imperative that women continue with the recommendations of pap smears every 2 years, even though they may have been vaccinated.
Gardasil does not prevent all types of cervical cancer, so it is important to continue with routine cervical cancer screening.
If you do a simple search on the internet, you'll find there are many sceptics and critics of Gardasil. There are those who claim that it's all a huge conspiracy by governments to help the pharmaceutical companies make billions of dollars. And there are those, of course, who say it's going to make teenage girls more promiscuous.
The primary purpose of this vaccine is to protect against the virus that causes cervical cancer, and the virus is mostly spread through sexual intercourse, so it makes good sense to make sure the vaccine is given well before a woman might be at risk of catching the virus. There's also good immunological reason for giving it at the age of 12. Our immune systems work better when we're young, and the older you get, the less well your immune system works. So getting vaccines in there early gives you the biggest immune response and therefore the best protection.
The Gardasil vaccination is probably the greatest thing that's happened in my medical career for the last 25 years. It's a vaccination that has the potential to wipe out a whole host of HPV-related diseases, and that's not just pre-cancer and cancer of the cervix. It's penile cancer in men, anal cancer in men, respiratory papillomatosis, as well as a number of cancers of the head and neck and the aerodigestive tract are all related to the human papillomavirus.
Each year, the National Cervical Screening Program detects up to 15,000 Australian women with high-grade abnormalities, although the number of new cases of cervical cancer has fallen to around 700.
This is a copper photograph of a normal cervix, and this is the junction between the skin cells on the cervix and the gland cells on the cervix, and we call that the squamocolumnar junction. And this is a very active area on the cervix with the cells rapidly changing all the time, and this is the area where the HPV virus infects and causes pre-cancer changes.
So this one?
Well, this is a view of another normal cervix prior to the application of the special dye that we use, the acetic acid, but dramatically after the application of the acetic acid, which is medical vinegar, you'll see that that red area becomes white, and this white skin will develop a number of different patterns. White skin indeed might be normal in some women, and it's the patterns that we identify that allow us to identify whether in fact this patient might have pre-cancer. So this is what we call punctation, and it is a sign of high-grade pre-cancer. And this is just another higher view of those blood vessels coming straight at us, and this is an area of high-grade pre-cancer.
Oh, now that one looks rather nasty.
Well, this is again another example of high-grade pre-cancer where we're in fact looking at the blood vessels side on, so it produces what we call a cobblestone appearance, almost like cobblestones you'd see on the side of the road. We would then take a biopsy from there to confirm that, and then offer the patient, once confirmed, a local treatment to the cervix. If unfortunately treatment doesn't occur, the next step is the early development of cancer, and this shows some very abnormal blood vessels as the cancer's starting to grow, and we call these corkscrew vessels. So this is the first sign that we might see under the colposcope of an early cancer, and this is the treatment of a cervix using what we call a loop or a LEEP electrode.
This is the video of an actual LEEP procedure, where an electrified wire is inserted through the vagina. The electrical current cuts away the affected cervical tissue in the immediate area of the loop wire. This causes the abnormal cells to rapidly heat and burst and separates the tissue as the loop wire moves through the cervix.